I went back and forth with that cliffhanger in episode 3 and I had 2 theories. And I know I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong, but I'm going to throw it at you anyways. My first theory is that it was the Punisher. It was John Berthel. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to The Critics. My name is Isaac Joel, and today I am joined by my co-host, Corbin. Corbin, introduce yourself to everybody. Let them know a little bit about yourself, man.
What's up, everybody? I'm Corbin Billings. I work with the technology that provides personality insight called the Color Matrix, but I'm also a graduate of USC Film School, independent filmmaker, writer, director, and a big Marvel fan. So super excited to be on The Critics today, diving into Daredevil Born Again.
Me and Corbin have been friends for a couple of years now, and we love talking about Marvel, Star Wars, anything really fandom related. Even if it's something that I don't understand, I'm fascinated to hear this guy's insight, his input, his opinion on stuff. And so I really hope this is the beginning of something new and something special. I'm ready to talk about Daredevil episode 3 with you, man. We talked about episode 1 and 2, me and you kind of one-on-one. So I know where it is that you're at right now, and you know where it is that I'm at right now. So from what I understand with episode 3, this was technically supposed to be episode 2 or episode 1, something like that. I think what we have right now, episode 2 and 3, were originally supposed to be 1 and 2, if that makes sense to you, if you're following that. What we had as the first episode opening with Foggy's death, that was never, I guess, originally there. We immediately started with the White Tiger stuff, and it's starting to make sense. I'm starting to see all of that, but just my overall thoughts before we dive too much into it. With episode 3, I loved it. I really did. I'm not one of those fans that's like, no Daredevil, no fighting, no action scene, no nothing like that. Like, if it is gripping storytelling, then by all means, I am invested into it. And this was a courtroom drama episode. It's gonna work for some people, it's not gonna work for other people. Some people are gonna find it extremely boring, perhaps. But dude, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, only because whenever it came down to like the sentencing or them trying to get the witness to take the stand, and when the jury like stood up and like gave the sentencing, all of those moments, the gripping moments, just had me at the edge. I don't know, Corbin, if you've ever seen this movie called Jury Number 9, something like that. I think it was directed by Clint Eastwood, Nicholas Hoult. Fantastic movie. My point is that I'm a big fan of courtroom stuff. What about you, man? Tell me what you thought about episode 3.
So this was like watching Law & Order MCU. And my favorite thing, though, about it is that no longer is She-Hulk the best lawyer-centric MCU show. I think that this is one step above that. As far as it goes with the courtroom and the emotional aspect, yeah, I'm like rooted in Hector's storyline, and I thought that the intrigue of going, well, actually we want to keep his secret identity a secret, versus now we actually have lost our star witness, and so now we need to run that ploy and reveal his identity. It basically actually allowed for Matt Murdock to be on trial while defending somebody else. And I thought that that was an interesting landscape for his character. Now, that being said, I can understand why initially, when the reports of the show would come out, that he didn't put on the suit until episode 4. And I can understand if we had started off this show and I didn't have that little taste with Bullseye and with Daredevil, the level of fatigue that I might have would be higher. But, you know, right now I can deal with a character building episode 3, even if it's meh, you know, and by meh I could mean like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. But I do think that the cliffhanger, there's something to be said for that. But you know, one of my favorite things about this universe is still the consistency, you know, being a nerd stickler for that. But the idea that, like, spoiler alert, can we go into
we were talking full spoilers, man. If you're not watching the show, you're missing out.
Yeah, okay, here we go. So the idea that Kingpin is recovering at the beginning of this show from being shot in the face, and then you know, here we have a very horrible moment, very tragic at the end with White Tiger taking one to the dome, and I'm just going, what is the physics here within the Marvel universe where Kingpin doesn't even have a sacred mystical amulet that's preventing him, but he's just got such great facial structure. Once again, later on, there's a shot that's sort of showing Kingpin's like how he's a reformed man. He's not the necessarily big brute force attacker because his knuckles are healing. He hasn't beaten anybody to a pulp in a while. And I'm going, well, shit, how long didn't he get any plastic surgery on his hand while he was getting all of the restorative work done on his face? Just the best plastic surgeons in the business.
I think Marvel is having a real issue right now, or they've always had an issue. We've kind of talked about this and touched upon this with just killing people willy-nilly anytime they want to, man. And I understand that the purpose of White Tiger is to represent Matt Murdock, is to represent other vigilantes, the repercussions of becoming and moonlighting as a vigilante, and they're using him to kind of represent that. But dude, talk about gone too soon. Now listen, elephant in the room, of course, obviously the actor is no longer with us, man, and that is very tragic, and that even made the ending of the episode even more tragic, dude, because I'll be honest, I had no idea, nor did I see that death coming, man. I didn't see Foggy's death coming. I didn't see White Tiger's death coming at all, and it's breaking me, dude. My heart right now is literally breaking, and I'm speaking as like a Hispanic man, as a Latino, as someone that like finally got to see a Mexican superhero on screen kick some ass for like 10 seconds, man, on like TikTok or whatever, man. Like I never really got to experience White Tiger. Also got a bunch of question marks about White Tiger. So yeah, he's got a mystic element. Does that give him powers? Is he super strong, or is he able to die like other people? Like, can you explain to me a little bit of White Tiger's abilities?
No, but I know that White Tiger is given mystical powers. Part of White Tiger's whole thing is that it's a legacy character. It's a mantle that gets passed down. So part of White Tiger in being Hector is that Hector dies and then he passes that mantle on, I think, to his daughter, who's in that courtroom. So if we want to bring her in on some Young Avengers stuff later on, you know, and it's interesting. I think here's what I like about this show. The callbacks. Well, okay, Marvel has this thing that they've started doing in terms of referencing other properties. There was a point where we were always building towards something. So when we get a little reference to something, it would be like, key point would be like Captain America and the Winter Soldier. He'd name drop Stephen Strange. And everybody, oh, wow, that's something that we haven't heard. Then we get to the point where we're at Captain America, Brave New World. And they're like, she's a graduate of the Widow program. And I'm like, bro, how many times do I need to hear that? The Wakandans helped him with his suit. And I'm like, bro, this is just another, it's old. Now we're in this show, they had a little slip in of all of the officers and the police officers that were giving great testimonials to White Tiger's character. They're like Officer Morales. And I'm like, I know who that is. And we're calling forward to that. And I've just appreciated those kind of Easter eggs being planted where it actually feels like we have momentum building towards something as opposed to like kind of hearkening to the past.
You know, they've been name dropping low-key Miles Morales even since Spider-Man Homecoming with Donald Glover's character in that. And so I love the name drop too. I don't have too much high hopes of them introducing a Miles Morales or even that story anytime soon. I feel like they're just teasing us when they do that.
Miles was written into the original screenplay for Doomsday that I read, which is like a pretty clear indication that he was going to be planted in Spider-Man 4. Now, this is a draft that's been totally abandoned, but they actually had Miles and Spider-Man sort of starting off that movie in Doomsday, or no, it wasn't actually called Doomsday at that point. It was called Kang Dynasty. They started off Kang Dynasty as going to college together and being Spider-Men.
No, going back to White Tiger and his daughter, there have been set photos for season 2. They are currently shooting season 2 right now. Things that are confirmed that we do know that's happening. Jessica Jones, she is coming back. She is making a return. She's posted on her Instagram page, her in New York on the set for Daredevil season 2. So we know that's happening. The character of his daughter, White Tiger's daughter, Hector, She's actually making a return as well, and I believe she is taking up that mantle in the second season. Don't know what that's going to look like per se, but it is really cool, to your point, seeing that they're using finally a character, a franchise, a property such as Daredevil, to build characters, introduce characters, bring people into the world and see how they fit into the MCU, man. Love right now what they're doing with the Punisher kind of storyline. I don't know the exact comic book that they're using, but I do understand that the iteration is that of like the cops abusing the Punisher symbol. They take up that mantle, that legacy, and they're basically adopting his like techniques in order to enforce the law, his brutal techniques. Now, the hypocrisy of this is that the Punisher exists outside of the law. He does the things that the law is not allowed and permitted to do. And yet here the cops are pretending to be an outlaw, to be him, man. And so it's going to be very interesting when John Bernthal, Punisher, finally enters the mix and the light bulb goes in his head that I don't know if that light bulb is actually going to go off in his head. His repercussions, you know, his techniques and his tactics. I don't know if he's going to look at that and be the same ever again, because I do think the Punisher needs to exist. I do think there needs to be a brutal hero out there like a Batman, like a Punisher, where they're going to do the things that not your average hero will do. You know, they're not necessarily anti-hero, but they're teetering on that line. They're right on that, you know, they're crossing those boundaries, man. So I'm very excited to see how the showdown is going to go between cops and Punisher.
Yeah, it's got some undertones of what's actually going on today in our own culture in this show. Initially, obviously, it was looking at like the charismatic, New York real estate kingpin, right, who then runs for office and then gets elected. And now it's getting into that sort of glamorization of the Punisher aesthetic that we see in the militarization of law enforcement. Then it also gives Daredevil like a good corruption ring to bring down in the midst, while William Fisk is sort of in this lull where he's actually trying to lay low and stay out of corruption and just go keto. I mean, the guy's eating boiled chicken in every scene. He's just, Vanessa, I'm a changed man. One piece of asparagus, there's always one piece of green on his plate. But I'm just saying that, like, he's trying to keep it clean, and so this allows Matt to still be exposing the corruption in the city while, you know, Kingpin's getting this chance to potentially redeem themselves. Both of them are actually mirroring themselves in really beautiful ways, the same way that the Punisher mirrors the law enforcement establishment, where they're both trying to be reformed, you know, or give up who they used to be. And that's why that diner scene was so exquisite, because they both know that the other one is eventually going to resort, you know, to their old ways, and it's just sort of a matter of time before that time bomb goes off. I do think that it's super cool that this is obviously going to lead Matt Murdock to seek out Frank Castle. They'll have a common enemy to align with in exacting vengeance in Hector's name. You know, just the degree of how brutal that vengeance is really the line between Daredevil and the Punisher, as we saw in season 2.
I went back and forth with that cliffhanger in episode 3 because, and I had two theories. And I know I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong, but I'm going to throw it at you anyways. My first theory is that it was the Punisher. It was John Bernthal. And I'm going to say that because it looked like his body stature. The logo, the spray paint, the uniform, it seemed very on the nose for something that he would be wearing and doing, and it felt very to his aesthetic. And I believed it was him because what if he believed that Hector actually did kill a cop, and that rubbed him perhaps the wrong way and brought him out of hiding for a minute to get punishment, to kill this. The public thinks he's a vigilante, but perhaps Punisher believed that he was a villain. That was my first thought, you know, and I was kind of going crazy with that. But obviously, it's more than likely the second, where it's one of the cops that is literally trying to be a copycat, essentially, do exactly what he does. So that kind of really threw me in for a loop.
Well, I'll do you one better. Okay, so first of all, the theory, right, that it is the Punisher is what Wilson Fisk would want you to believe. It's why he's hired BB, maybe, to even go and create that spin. You know, these vigilantes, Vanessa, They'll eat each other unless I impose control. Think about this one. We know that the main villain for the season is Muse. And in the background, we see some shots, just like all of this graffiti that we kind of hear about that's all over the city that's popping up that they keep focusing on. There's a big Punisher logo. Now, it could be the cops that are doing that, and that it's rogue cops that are spray painted the city, or it's the guy that we know who is about to be a serial killer, who is obsessed with painting things, and specifically could have imitated the Punisher. So it could be Muse that is the actual one that took out White Tiger, seeking to draw Punisher out of hiding and then frame the cops in the eyes of Daredevil, or what would be other vigilantes.
These are
just
great theories,
that's
honestly.
That's a wild.
That's very fun. One thing that pissed me off watching the show, Matt tells Hector that, like, when you go back, and if you go back, you can never put on the suit again. You can never do that ever again. Like, that life's done for you, basically. And the minute he goes back home, he's putting on the gloves, he's putting on the mask. And this threw me off because I was like, wait, where's the wife? Where's the wife stopping him, preventing him from doing this? Like, dude, you just made bail. You just got out. You just got pronounced not guilty. Don't you think you want to stay home for a couple of weeks?
Isaac,
take some time off?
She was out getting flowers to celebrate that moment of joy. They just keep missing each other, buying each other flowers.
I was pissed off watching him put the suit on, even before the death. Just watching him at home putting the suit on, I was like, dude, what are you doing, man? Enjoy your freedom and what you have now. So I was low-key very pissed off, and I'm not saying that the character got what he deserved, man, but he was literally out running around in the alleys. He wasn't like crouched over, like looking down on the city like Daredevil or Spider-Man. Like, he was literally like, what's going on? Oh, I hear something over here. And then boom, dude got shot, Soprano style, man. Straight up mafia gang style. And I was like, look, bro, should have just stayed home.
I think that these days I get really tough on the MCU because everybody's always wearing those nanotech masks that just form over their heads. And at a certain point, I really want that old mask aesthetic of, like, they have to put on the mask.
Yes.
The problem is that I bet the nanotech is bulletproof. And just the little leather mask that White Tiger's putting on is not. Do you ever see Kill Bill Volume 2? Of course you have. But there's that great scene at the very end where Bill's using the analogy of Superman and Clark Kent, where Clark Kent is the alter ego and Superman is the reality. And I really got that sense in the way that they were writing White Tiger, where Hector was the alter ego, the White Tiger was the essence of who he was, and he couldn't ever actually cage that. And this speaks to an element of, like, whenever these Marvel characters get paired with gods, whether it's Moon Knight with Khonshu, or it's Black Panther with Bast, or even like Jane Foster eventually becoming Thor, there's a possession of these individuals by these deities, and then the deities sort of have their own will with them, which comes at the character's expense. You know, it just speaks to, like, whatever Hector's afterlife was. You know, you spoke to, like, that Sopranos-esque ending, and I did like the, you know, to a degree, the abruptness, but I thought that harkening back to the Sound of the Frogs, this is like him returning home to Puerto Rico, and it was like the equivalent of his Field of Reeds whenever, or gosh, the big, huge, beautiful sky that Rocket Raccoon talked about in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 that then he sees his friends in at the end. It's interesting, like, the afterlife in the MCU is always usually what you kind of think it's going to be or believe it to be.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned Guardians 3. Just a side note, I was watching it yesterday just for fun. And dude, here's my challenge to anyone listening out there. Watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and try not to cry. And man, I've seen that movie several times. I know what exactly happens when it happens. But dude, maybe that's what makes it even more emotional, is like when those moments come up and you're like, dude, I was literally just crying on the couch watching that movie. It's still good. It really is good. I'll give James
that movie makes me cry solidly
guy.
3 times. That movie makes me cry solidly, especially that end. There's such a great feeling of satisfaction, like they've all come a long way as they're dancing there at the end, that it always, anyway. But yeah,
going back,
Back to Daredevil.
Daredevil, yeah. The courtrooms. I kind of want to touch upon the chemistry between the other opposing lawyer who's defending the state of New York and the cops, and also the judge himself. These are two hard-headed characters that Matt Murdock is being opposed up against. You know, he did the right thing coming forward with the information of White Tiger. He knew about it. He brought it to their attention and begged them not to bring it up in court, and he got it. Matt is so good at convincing people. You know, I don't like to believe that it's his disability. I don't think people treat him any differently. I actually think that's what's funny, is because he's blind, they're able to look at each other, roll their eyes, point at this guy, and kind of have that demeanor against him, and he doesn't even know that. So people are always like against him, and he knows that, he recognizes that. But I love that moment when he asks him not to introduce that into evidence, and then he loses his witness goes AWOL on him, basically. And then later on, he exposes a Hector of being White Tiger, and then immediately the judge is like, all right, dude, get back here. And like a principal, like his boss, bro, literally like chewing him out. Like, dude, you sat right here and convinced me. You made me feel bad. You convinced me. And then you go and do this, man. I love that dynamic between those characters, and his defense too, of being like, well, listen, man, my hands were tied. I meant what I said, but where we're at now, man, I have no other choice but to convince the people that he's a hero, that he had good intentions, man. And that moment when Matt Murdock goes inside the courtroom and it's empty, and there's nobody there, and he's there by himself, and he's holding his cane. He puts his cane down and he sits at the pew, man, and the music kind of just swells up and gets very kind of overwhelming. Those are the moments I live for and breathe, man, because it reminds you that he's struggling with his faith, that he's struggling with that relationship with God, that he feels like he's not worthy, you know, to step in a foot inside of the church, so he just hangs out outside of there. And the courtroom has now essentially become his chapel, man. It's become his church, man. And I really love that as an evolution for the character. I don't need Daredevil always like in the pew talking to a priest, confessing his sins. I don't need that. I just need that internal feeling that he's going through, man, and the music does a beautiful job at conveying what he's going through.
Yeah, wait, I'm glad that it was pretty obvious, right? The way even that they shot it, that they framed the courtroom as being like a cathedral or a church, and so he has these moments where he's like asking for there to be justice, almost from a higher power, so that he doesn't have to take things into his own hands. And I think that this is sort of where the personality of these heroes, it gets interesting to look at and consider, because this is what allows for these emotional beats to land and then eventually mature into a really satisfying payoff. And specifically with Marvel, they have this very interesting dynamic where the villain and the hero will usually reflect each other, but sometimes be different approaches of the same personality tendencies. A good example of that might just be Mr. Fantastic and Dr. Doom. Reed Richards is like a brilliant mind and scientist, and therefore you have to have like a really brilliant evil mastermind in order to oppose him. With Daredevil and with Kingpin, we usually look at things in terms of three colors and like their strongest tendencies. Number one is red. They both take things into their own hands and are determined to get whatever they want to see done. Great example of that would be like Wilson Fisk in the first episode when he's like, we're gonna fill this hole, Vanessa. And he's just like, everybody stop what you're doing, and we're gonna fill this pothole. The same way when Matt, he needs to protect the witness, the cops are gonna do something, I gotta show up and I have to beat down these cops and these police officers and actually expose myself a little bit, right? In order to get done what I need to get done. That's the red that's coming in. He and Kingpin both share this. Then you get into the green that's behind me, and that's all about fairness and looking for justice. It's like, in the big picture, we have a better vision for the future. And this is like Wilson Fisk, every single time he's talking about this city, I can protect my city. And it really reflects the same thing that's going on with Daredevil in the back of his mind, trying to protect the innocent of the city. But he does it by, stalking the rooftops and swinging from things. And then the last thing is the purple. and the purple gets to like administrative and rules in order to create order. And for Matt, that's the law. For Kingpin right now, it was being a criminal mastermind or leader of a crime syndicate, but it's become political office. So even right now, the way that they're currently positioned, they're really, both of them are leaning into their purple tendencies. Kingpin's leaning into his role as a mayor, making decisions, sort of in his rule. And then we've got Matt Murdock that's trying to create, and save people's lives and protect the innocent in the courtroom. But they're both going towards institutions to try to center them and keep them from, in their individual extremes, going into a really intense green and red space where, because things aren't fair or justice wasn't served, i.e. this Hector thing happening, that we're going to see the resurgence of their inner demons, which is those extreme red tendencies, which go from like, I'm determined and decisive, to I'm a dominating devil. And I think that that's where the brutality in the show is going to emerge here.
Wow, man, that was really well put. Love hearing how you kind of like break down the emotional and the personality aspects and how they're literally colliding together, and they're eventually going to merge together. The alter egos that of Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock. Right now, they're trying their best to just be themselves and contribute to the city the best way that they know how, the right way, by not moonlighting as a criminal mastermind or as a vigilante. They're trying to fight those urges, but it's going to come to a point where they're both going to have to unleash their inner selves, man. I kind of want to hear your rating on this episode. I know you mentioned it earlier, you're kind of giving it maybe a 6 out of 10. For me, I love this episode. I really did. I don't think it's the best or most perfect episode ever in television. I'm not saying that for sure. But I did love, it's the actor's last performance. So that just makes it even more powerful and enriching for me. And I do think just beyond that, he did give a solid role. If the actor was still here, my emotions would be very upset that the character is gone, and I would have loved to see the character more. But since we're kind of at a closing chapter for that, I'm glad that there's closure and a conclusion to that character. Love the courtroom stuff, love the cinematography. Not crazy about the colors. I feel like Marvel has this like washed, colorless, soulless kind of feel to their movies and television shows, and I understand that to them it's like adding a maturity level to it, man. But when you see the difference between the colors in the original Netflix series and the colors in this show, it's like the clarity is bumped up, the contrast is bumped up, the colors are just like strong and boosted, and it feels gritty, and this just feels like it looks flat and real boring and soulless. But I'm not saying the show is boring and soulless. I do think it has that, and I think we're off to a good start thus far, and I do want to keep my eye out for when the show starts to lose me. But right now I am heavily invested in these characters. I think I'm gonna rate this episode 8 out of 10. What about you, Corbin?
Well, okay, so I'm gonna remain solid with the 6.5, because I gotta save the good ratings for when the episode really shows up. And even in that first episode with that fight with Bullseye and Daredevil, that opening would be an 8 out of 10 for me. And so it's just to say that I believe that this show does have legs. I think that it's going to have to demonstrate. Marvel has really marketed this show actually based on a complete reinvention and overhaul. We're getting to a point where we're reaching all of the new territory where apparently they've incorporated and learned from, the fatigue or the feedback that fans were having, and then fix this and address this. We're about to go into that territory, and that's what gets me excited. I do believe that Bullseye will come back, and that's something that I live to see more of. I think that we haven't gotten into any of the stuff with Muse yet, and I think that could become really rich, considering that we have this psychiatrist character who has great chemistry with Matt, but she's right here as like a nexus between being stalked by a potential serial killer, being this psychiatrist and therapist for Wilson Fisk and Vanessa, and then also being having this court and romantic relationship with Matt. And I want to dive more into that. What I'd love to see wrapped up relatively quickly, although they'll probably take their sweet time with it, is this dynamic between Vanessa and Wilson Fisk, where It's just sort of like the deterioration of the relationship, and can I trust you? Can I not trust you? I need to get to that moment because Vanessa wants to go full Cersei, but right now, Kingpin is holding her back, and there's going to be a moment where they're going to like make out over somebody's dead body and, you know, and like appreciate a piece of art. And that's going to be the moment that I go like, okay, now we're back, baby. And that's when I'm going to, my scores are going to get to like the 9 and 10 level. But until we get to that moment and we're just sort of, you know, dealing with like, oh, this gang shot this gang, what are we going to do about it? It's not my problem, Vanessa.
That's so funny.
That's a 6.5.
Them bonding over art or something. That's hilarious, dude. I think
It's got to
my
be bloody
theory,
art.
it is always bloody art. My theory is Vanessa will die. If we're going on the trajectory and the path that we are right now, where the writers just don't care about these characters and they want to see them die like immediately, I feel like Vanessa's death is going to be pinnacle to Wilson Fisk becoming Kingpin again. That's just my theory. That's why he's resisting that. That's why he's trying not to, even though he's blackmailing, you know, the police and other people. I'm sure he's still kind of low-key up to like no good at the end of the day, but I do think it's going to take something significantly happening to Vanessa. And I also just don't think the actress is going to be in the MCU for a long period of time. I don't see her being part of the story for the next 5 years. That's not to say I don't like Vanessa or I have a problem with the marriage dynamic. I actually do really enjoy that for Wilson, but I just feel like as a storyteller, it's got to get to a point where, like, you know, they tried deporting her, you know, they try separating them, now they're together and they're still having problems. Like, maybe this love is never really meant to be. One last thing that I want to touch upon for Daredevil and kind of Disney Plus itself, if you care about viewership numbers, if you care about, like, is the show successful, is it actually, like, are people actually watching it, you know? Not to say that I even care about that stuff, but I was just watching a video before we jumped on here, breaking down kind of like the numbers for previous Disney Plus shows. We're talking like Percy Jackson, Agatha All Along, you know, The Winter Soldier and Falcon, or a Mandalorian, you know, Andor, all those shows. You look at those viewership numbers on like the opening night, and I think, you know, sometimes they're like around like maybe 11 million, 12 million, 17 million, you know, something like that, like around the teens. For Daredevil right now, from what I understand, the first couple episodes were like around like the 7 million mark. And from what I've been told is that it's kind of like the lowest like viewership thing right now, meaning not a lot of people are really watching Daredevil, and that's probably for a lot of reasons that we've already discussed. The major overhaul, not a lot of people watch the Netflix series, so they just don't know or care, you know, when they turn the show on and Foggy Nelson dies, they're like, oh, well, I'm not invested in any of these people, so I really don't care what happens to any of them. So they're in a bit of a tough spot right now.
They got the guy from the Mighty Ducks. No.
Yeah, man. So I have high hopes. Hopefully people will eventually start getting into the show. Right now, I don't think it's hitting that high point just quite yet, but it is definitely becoming a really good slow burn, in my opinion.
Yeah, and what's important to remember about all of these Disney Plus numbers is that Disney as a brand has done critical brand damage to themselves.
Yes.
Over specifically the last 5 years. And I think that there's an ideological component that's going on, but I think the actual nail in the coffin, and it's been a repeated nail in the coffin over, 5 years, has been Disney Plus. They undermined their own business model in needing to create all of this streaming content, which then, even in this concept of Daredevil Born Again, how expensive these shows are becoming because of all of these reshoots. The budget for Captain America Brave New World inflated tremendously to a point where now there's all of this conjecture about what is the actual budget of that movie versus what was reported as the budget, so that there could be some sort of type of a semblance where that movie made its money back, but it's not even looking like that movie is going to recoup its full projected budget. And then that speaks a little bit more into like the position where we're at, where we go, oh, well, how do we garner back and get the fan base to trust us again? And at a point that was like, well, we'll harken back to the things that they used to love, and we'll bring back, their Tobey Maguire or their Andrew Garfield or all the Netflix shows.
Robert
They
Downey
have
Jr.
to enter, exactly. But they have to also enter a new era, which is going to be pioneered by the X-Men, where things are moving forward in a new direction. And I do believe that that is on the horizon. But the Disney has done critical damage, and it's just going to continue. It's like we haven't even hit Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs coming out yet.
We will definitely be reviewing that with you, Guy.
Yeah. But what I can say is that as I watch the show and I see how these episodes have been reworked, with like my filmmaker cap on, I go, well, I have hope. And then when I look to the future and I see the Russo brothers at the helm of the ship, then I go, okay, because these guys really understand the emotional beats and the payoffs and the core of these characters. I mean, you look at the balance and what they were able to do with the ensemble and Community, and then you really understand why Civil War, Winter Soldier, Infinity War, and Endgame all really stand out. There's a respect to character motivations that really goes on, and it's like, that's what I like to see in this show, because honestly, when I try to dive into Sam Wilson and all of his character motivations and what's going on in his core, there's not as much there. Now, there will be, as soon as, let's say, an evil alternate reality Steve Rogers shows up in the picture, then he and Bucky are going to have tremendous emotional stakes. We've been building up to that, but you just drop him in his own show, and we've seen that.
Yeah.
We've seen how audiences receive it.
I understand. It's tough being a Marvel fan these days. Just my last kind of like point and note is that it is extremely hard to be a Marvel fan, not because it's hard to keep up with, the changes or the stories or whatever. Like I don't care about any of that. It's just quality, man. It's quality. It's hard for me to try to drag my friends, my girlfriend, my family to go see a movie and defend it and be like, listen, you're gonna have a good time. Like it's starting to get really tricky for me to convince people to go to the movies. So I understand. I completely understand. As like an average audience member, you don't want to really be wasting your time and watching the same stuff all over again, man. But hey, I'm excited. Eventually, hopefully one day we'll get to see Daredevil realized on the big screen, and hopefully he might even show up in Doomsday, man. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll see.
It's definitely going to be Doomsday. Until then, we basically just have to slog through some remaining Disney Plus content. And if people don't want to watch, then I encourage them to just go to the beaches of Puerto Rico, sit on next to the ocean, and listen to the sounds of the frogs. Better than
or you
Disney
can go
noise.
watch the Sony Spider-Verse movies. Go watch Craven, man, or Venom.
Oh, yeah,
And then be grateful for what we have. Definitely don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, everybody. I just posted my Mickey 17 review. That is up on the channel right now. And tonight, I'm actually going to go check out a screening at AMC for Black Bag, man. And so I have no idea what that movie is about. I know that has Michael Fassbender in it. Very interested by it, man, but we'll be checking that movie out. And there's other films coming out too that me and Corbin are going to be watching and reviewing and discussing on here with you all. I really appreciate you guys for listening to this. As always, my name is Isaac Joel. I've been your host, Corbin Billings, and you've been listening to The Critics. We'll catch you next time.